Ruth chapter 2.
Now Naomi had a relative of her husband's, a worthy man of the clan of Elimelech, whose name was Boaz. And Ruth the Moabite said to Naomi,
"Let me go to the field and glean among the ears of grain, after him in whose sight I shall find favor."
And she said to her,
"Go, my daughter."
So she set out and went and gleaned in the field after the reapers. And she happened to come to the part of the field belonging to Boaz, who was of the clan Elimelech. And behold, Boaz came from Bethlehem, and he said to the reapers,
"The Lord be with you."
And they answered,
"The Lord bless you."
Then Boaz said to his young man, who was in charge of the reapers,
"Whose young woman is this?"
And the servant, who was in charge of the reapers, answered,
"She is a young Moabite woman who came back with Naomi from country of Moab. She said, 'Please let me glean and gather among the sheaves after the reapers.' So she came, and she has continued from early morning until now, except for a short rest."
Then Boaz said to Ruth,
"Now listen, my daughter, do not go to the glean in another field or leave this one, but keep close to my young woman. Let your eyes be on the field that are reaping and go after them. Have I not charged the young men not to touch you? And when you are thirsty, go to the vessels and drink what the young men have drawn."
Then she fell on her face, bowing to the ground, and said to him,
"Why have I found favor in your eyes, that you should take notice of me, since I am a foreigner?"
But Boaz answered her,
"All that you have done for your mother-in-law since the death of your husband has been fully told to me, and how you left your father and mother and your native land and came to a people that you did not know before. The Lord repay you for what you have done, and a full reward be given you by the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to take refuge."
Then she said,
"I have found favor in your eyes, my lord, for you have come for me and spoken kindly to your servant, though I am not one of your servants."
And at mealtime Boaz said to her,
"Come here and eat some bread and dip your morsel in the wine."
So she sat beside the reapers, and he passed to her roasted grain, and she ate until she was satisfied, and she had some left over. When she rose to glean, Boaz instructed his young men, saying,
"Let her glean even among the sheaves, and do not reproach her. And also pull out some from the bundles for her, and leave it for her to glean, and do not rebuke her."
So she gleaned in the field until evening. Then she beat out what she had gleaned, and it was about an ephah of barley. And she took it up and went into the city. Her mother-in-law saw what she had gleaned. She also brought out and gave her what food she had left over after being satisfied. And her mother-in-law said to her,
"Where did you glean today, and where have you worked? Blessed be the man who took notice of you."
So she told her mother-in-law with whom she had worked, and said,
"The man's name in whom I worked today is Boaz."
And Naomi said to her daughter-in-law,
"May he be blessed by the Lord, whose kindness has not forsaken the living or the dead."
Naomi also said to her,
"The man is a close relative of ours, one of our redeemers."
And Ruth the Moabite said,
"Besides, he said to me, 'You shall keep close by my young men until they have finished all my harvest.'"
And Naomi said to Ruth, her daughter-in-law,
"It is good, my daughter, that you will go out with this young woman, lest in another field you be assaulted."
So she kept close to the young woman of Boaz, gleaning until the end of barley and wheat harvests. And she lived with her mother-in-law.
Well, we're back for episode 2 for this McGregor Podcast Special. And I just want to say that cliffhanger from chapter 1, that they arrived at the beginning of barley harvest, is huge because it's pointing to the providence of God. I love how the author doesn't really overtly make any large statements about God, but there's so much that's implied about like the behind the scenes work of the Lord. I'm from a really small town in Ohio, and there's lots and lots of cornfields, and the likelihood of Ruth going back to the house of bread where there's barley just growing everywhere. Yeah. And her just happening to, like the author puts it, to end up at Boaz's field is remarkable. And it can only be God.
The probable, nothing in the text says this for certain, but it's probable that the whole culture of Bethlehem was like a farming culture. And these fields in every direction, as far as the eye can see, all around town are like co-op fields.
Yeah. And
so you're right, you are really messing with the law of averages if you believe the law of averages put her in Boaz's crosshairs. They're just not even credible.
Why don't we talk about why it's important for Ruth to have ended up at Boaz's field? Why does the rest of the story hinge on this?
Yeah, because there's the kinsman redeemer rules come into play because, and we've already seen it in the text, that Boaz is a family member, a kinsman, and if she ends up somewhere else, then she's not going to. She may have met someone that she became attracted to and married, but it's not going to be the connection that this story wants to tell us about the bloodline that's going to be involved and the family that's going to be involved. In the providence of God, as God's will is unfolding, it had to be this field. And so God saw to it that it was.
Yeah.
Do you ever wonder why Naomi doesn't go work? She just sends out Ruth.
No, I wonder.
Was she so depressed still from?
Or we don't really have any specific markers about her age.
But
yeah, she is sort of the dispatcher, isn't she? Come to think of it,
sends Ruth out, and it's interesting that they would, because Ruth was not hired by Boaz, she just shows up.
Yeah.
So it was this understanding, this welfare work program where they would leave the edges of the field for people that come in and
they were supposed to harvest inefficiently, basically, and leave behind for those who would be food poor the cleanup of the field. That's what gleaning is. It's cleaning up the field after the production harvest has come through.
Right.
And you get to the edges, and the inefficiencies of the harvest are for the poor.
Right. But it's in that where Boaz sees her.
Yeah.
Already has an understanding of who she is because her reputation of what she's done for Naomi and coming back and supporting Naomi. So he knows that. He sees her, takes notice of her, right? And that's, again, is what you're getting at, that providential moment.
Yep.
Where here she is at all the fields in Bethlehem, ends up, and Boaz shows up to his job site and sees her.
There's a part of me. Oh,
no, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. There's a part of me that wonders how he said, "Whose young woman is this?" I wonder. But at the same, it was an important question for him to ask, not like, "Who is this?" Because he's basically asking, like, to whom does she belong? Because your family line does make a huge impact on the trajectory of the rest of your life.
And you wonder if there weren't some visible difference. She is of a different ethnicity, and I've never met a Moabitess standing beside a Jewish in 1400 BC. So I don't know whether that would have been an evident difference or not. It is later when he has the conversation with her, he's pulled her background. But I think whose young woman is this is some combination of I don't recognize her. I don't recognize her. Right.
Yeah.
She looks a little bit different. And maybe she's not ugly. God certainly has used the attractiveness of people to cause people to be attracted to people before.
Or maybe she was just really good at gleaning.
Yeah, and then the work ethic thing does come up. I tell you what, she worked all day and she doesn't slack.
Took one little break.
And so there's some impressive things that come up.
I love how we can talk about the details and infer a lot of things and try to connect dots as much as we can, but ultimately we still have to let the scripture speak for itself. So
thanks for bringing us back, Chloe.
Yeah, no, I'm not. I actually interpret it like whose young woman is this? Like, he has like something in the back of his mind. He kind of says it nonchalantly on purpose, just so nobody knows that he's interested. You know what I mean? He's just kind of like throwing it out there, seeing what he can gather without really like being
really
like,
thought about this a lot.
Boaz the millennial.
Yeah. I guess that's my millennial interpretation.
She's he goes and checks her social media.
Oh, that's all too real.
Oh.
So what is a kinsman redeemer? Why is this a big deal? Actually, I can give you the answer because I have the verse right here. From Deuteronomy 25:5, we have a law that God placed. If brothers dwell together and one of them dies and has no son, the wife of the dead man shall not be married outside of the family to a stranger. Her husband's brother shall go into her and take her as his wife and perform the duty of a husband's brother to her.
Yeah.
Very interesting law.
Yeah, the perpetuation of bloodlines was a very big deal. The population of Israel was not a big population. They were marked out by the distinctiveness of being God's covenant people, and the preservation of those family lines and tribal identities and all those things was very, very important. And so this is the law of levirate marriage, and it's a necessity. And remember that both Naomi and, for our purposes here, Ruth are widows. And while she's a Moabite widow, I guess you could make a case that maybe the law would not strictly apply.
Yeah.
But the spirit of the law is very much alive among the godly remnant of Israel, the people who are in this time of the judges, at least seeking to obey the law.
Especially for Boaz, I think we see that because we'll see later there was someone else that could have. It was closer.
And he even
backed away,
seeks to defer
but not Boaz.
The impulse in Boaz to behave redemptively, and again, we don't have to sort of clean these people up to the point that they're no longer human. There's no doubt that as the story progresses, he falls in love with this young woman, and there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing prurient about that. But his initial generosity toward her, his initial grace toward her, he doesn't have to, like later on when the gleaning was supposed to benefit from an inefficient harvest, but he goes further. He goes, look, you guys, I want you to harvest extra sloppy. And make sure that you are leaving a substantial amount behind in the area where she's going to glean, which is a way to be generous to her without being just, hi, here's a bunch of stuff for you. So there's an artfulness to his sort of desire to behave redemptively toward her.
Well, there were even the gleaning. There were laws for gleaning, and so that even just speaks all the more to how God cares for the widows, and Jesus acts that way too. He cares for the widows and those in desperate situations.
He does.
So
above and beyond.
Yeah. Years ago, I listened to a sermon, and I don't remember where it was or anything, but I remember that there were three major points from it: that a kinsman redeemer has the right, the resources, and the will to save us. And that is who Boaz, spoiler alert, comes to be for Ruth. He has the right, potentially.
Which comes from a blood connection. Yeah. Remember, he's got to be a relative. And you're right in terms of expanding that to Christ. That Christ, born of Mary, has a blood connection to us.
Yeah, and he had the resources to redeem her. I mean, he has money to take care of her if the whole field is his.
Right.
And then the will. It will come to find out that he is interested in her. But that is how Christ is for us. He has the resources to take care of us because he's God. And then because he has the will, he loves us, and so he's a very, there are just a lot of parallels to Christ in Boaz. Yeah. And his character too, just the fact that he's interested in her because of, like what you were saying before, Pastor Mark, her work ethic.
Yeah, very much so.
He was drawn to her.
And I think that covenant, experiencing God's faithfulness that Boaz had experienced over the years and understanding how God had blessed him, his desire was to be a blessing. We see that with his employees, the people that work for him, and apparently they had great respect for him, just how he treated them and the response there. And so now he sees a foreigner, even before he knows all the details, but this is, I want to take care of this person. And then he finds out about her, and I think that begins that process you're talking about of, oh, well, she is a relative. There is potential something here.
Yeah. And again, the romantic undercurrent does not cheapen the redemptive character. Obviously, the romantic undercurrent keeps this from being like a parable of Christ. This is a nonfiction story. This happened.
This happened, yeah.
And so while I believe there is a marvelous and elegant and beautiful romantic undercurrent here, it doesn't lessen, cheapen, or make that's a technological term or theological term. It doesn't diminish the theological story that's being told here of a Redeemer who, of his own volition, of his own resources, of his own legitimate connection, moves unilaterally to redeem one that could not lay claim to that redemption.
Yeah.
He does it anyway, and that's the beauty of the story.
Yeah, and we see that new covenant grace even reflected here in verse 20. There's a word kindness that is translated to the Hebrew word hesed,
Right.
which means loving kindness, or you said, the closest.
Yeah,
to grace.
it's a very rich word. Loving kindness is how the archaic English translations typically translate it, but it's grace. It is kindness driven by love in a way that is undeserved.
And it's the word Naomi uses to describe what Boaz has done for Ruth and for her, and so another beautiful picture there.
He's gone way beyond anything.
Even through her bitterness.
Yeah, and this, I think we're starting to see maybe a little bit of
a thaw.
Yeah, a little bit of a thaw here, and that she comes home with all this stuff and finds out it's Boaz. Boaz has taken an interest in her.
Yeah.
This is a good thing, and so she uses that phrase, may he be blessed by the Lord, whose kindness has not forsaken the living or the dead. And so here's it's still maybe a little snarky there in that how she words it, but
and I love how Ruth never says, "I told you so," because I'm sure that if she had the faith to go with Ruth, with Naomi in the first place, then she had the at least the mind to understand who God was and his nature, but she wasn't comforting Naomi and just saying, "Oh, come on, everything's going to be okay." But she stood with her, and she was with her the whole time, and didn't need to spew a whole bunch of even Bible verses at her, while I'm sure that she may have encouraged her in that way when she's living in God's faithfulness here and finally seeing something happen. She doesn't say, "I told you so." And I think that speaks so much to what God has done inside of her heart.
We certainly see a whole lot more about her walk with God as an encouragement to Naomi than anything explicitly that is Naomi's walk with God encouraging Ruth.
Yeah.
Ruth kind of becomes, and sort of the teaser at the end of chapter 2 is she lived with her mother-in-law. Ruth is still living with Naomi, and Naomi is obviously taking note of what's going on, possibly between Ruth and Boaz. But Ruth has come to be the one who is more taking spiritual initiative, and certainly the one who's being more used of God.
What do you think when Naomi tells her that after she talks about the kindness, she said, "The man is a close relative of ours, one of our redeemers"? What do you think happened in Ruth's mind at that point? Did she start thinking what might happen, you think? Or did she even understand that?
Yeah, she would have had to, in order for the comment to have any context at all. And I'm Chloe, I'm doing what you just alluded to. I'm seeing two dots, and I'm drawing a line between them, and the line is not scripture. The two dots are she's bringing up levirate marriage as a principle to her daughter-in-law. So that is happening.
Yep.
So I'm inferring around that somehow Ruth has to have heard of that for the comment to make any sense.
Right.
She has to, for her to say that to her in the moment, it has to be, that levirate marriage thing we talked about. He's one of your relatives.
Yeah.
And I think, again, as I don't think that that Boaz's initial question, tell me who that young lady is over there, is bereft of interest in knowing who that young lady is. I don't think Ruth was grossed out to hear, Boaz is on the kinsman redeemer list.
Yeah.
I don't think Ruth's response in that moment was, "Would you stop?" I think it's,
Yeah.
So.
And Naomi continues to encourage her to keep going and stay with his
Well,
women.
yeah, because she's going to be taken care of, though, too. So it's kind of selfish in a way.
Selfish there, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like, if you're going to be living off of a wealthy man.
You can be self-aware and self-interested without being overtly selfish. However, the degree, I'm gonna take away your chapter 2 into chapter 3 spoiler. Can I do the chapter 2 into chapter 3 spoiler?
Do it, and then we'll close this thing out.
The degree to which Naomi encourages Ruth is a matter of some question and some controversy, because she certainly seems to encourage Ruth in a very encouraging way. But that is chapter 3 for our next episode.
Yeah, and we will see you there. Be sure to like, subscribe, share, do the thing that you're supposed to do to make this thing get bigger. We love our listeners, and we'll see you next time. This has been a McGregor Podcast Special, hosted and directed by me, Chloe Weimer. Special guests were Pastor Russell Howard and Pastor Mark Bricker, executive producer and editor Christian Miller. The character readings were read by our narrator, Elora Bays, Naomi, Drea Rose, Ruth, Emma May, Boaz, Jake Hastings, and the elder, Asher Edwards. The set design was Trudy Evans, audio technician, Bill Steinbrecher, social media coordinator, Julia Weimer, director of McGregor Podcast, Jeff Eskridge. McGregor Podcast is a ministry of McGregor Baptist Church. For more information, head to McGregorpodcast.com. Merry Christmas.